Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Hydra here with Roll Corruption, another tip and trick video for you GMs out there and perhaps even players that just want to have a little think about this stuff. I find it fascinating. Anyway, today is going to be a system on creating a variety of opponents within your TTRPG that's going to make your campaign truly memorable and a much more interesting experience. What we're going to be doing is creating a system to create 4 opponents today, one of which will be your party or hero, protagonist, whatever you want to call them today, and 3 that they are in direct conflict with. Let's get the show on the road. We're going to kick off by talking about our protagonist. For the sake of argument, in our story and campaign, they're going to be value-orientated, more in the direction of love, family, goodness, openness, kindness. They're going to be the traditional hero trope. Now, I appreciate you as GMs may be thinking, hey, I don't have complete control over my party, and that's true. A writer does, a GM doesn't. However, I will say after you've played maybe 1 or 2 sessions and thrown some very minor obstacles at a party, you should have developed a little bit of a feeling as to how they're going to be playing. If you've got any chaotic characters, it's going to be fairly apparent early on. If they're all generally orientated towards goodness, then you have something that you can work with. So you can either create opponents directly opposed to individual party members, or you can perhaps take the average of the party, the general moral vibe that they would come to in a conclusion, and create an opposition to that. But for now, we're going to say that our party's primary values are honesty, family, love, openness, kindness. Perhaps there are a bunch of brothers. 3 of the 4 are brothers, family members, cousins, and thus we have something that they have in common that we can prey upon, because the primary opponent should be the person most suited to attacking, and I don't necessarily mean inflicting damage upon the party, I mean directly challenging one of their values. So we're going to have someone instead who's bitter, resentful, angry, and destructive. That individual is going to allow us to effectively kidnap perhaps a father figure, perhaps threaten a love figure, and this way our party has the opportunity to tell each other, and you as the GM, tell the story of this is their character, these are their values, and this is what is important to them by battling with this opposed force. So the entire reason we have this opposition is to generate conflict, because without opposition of value, it is very difficult to create satisfying conflict. However, I will say that we need a reason for these to be in conflict. It's simply a big old world out there, so if 2 people really hate each other that much, they would just walk away. So you need something in the middle that they are both aiming for, a goal that they share in common. Now, this goal could take many forms. They could both be after the same thing, place, item. It can be almost anything. If you take Batman and Joker, for example, both Batman and Joker are trying to influence Gotham. So both of them have stakes in what happens in Gotham, so when one of them does something to influence Gotham, the other person doesn't like it. Thus, we have a perpetual amount of conflict. So, even in a very abstract way, these 2 must have a goal, even if they want to do different things with that goal, or even if the way they approach the goal is very different. There must be something that binds the 2 together. So now we have these 2 opposed forces, one of them attacking the protagonist, the hero, to draw out some of those primary values. And I would say at this point it is worth saying that the villain needs a satisfying moral argument as to why they're doing what they're doing. They're not just doing it because they're a dick, because that's going to be an entirely unforgettable villain. In this situation, the individual has a lost lover. So the hero has a lover. She's very pretty. She has a very small neck, but you've got to give it to her. A very pretty, and in almost all photos, just sort of hanging open, but love her. The villain doesn't have a lover, but used to. So we have positive lover, negative lover, if that makes sense. So great opposition there, fantastic. And it shows the what if, what could happen story to a villain. Absolutely fantastic, love it. So These are both going to be in perpetual conflict due to their shared goal. We have a moral argument that makes rough sense, and the values are clearly in conflict with each other. Marvellous. So now we need to say, okay, what else can we throw in here that's going to make this more interesting? We need someone else who is also competing for the same goal, but is going to have values opposed to both of these existing individuals. Well, what do they both have in common? Let's have a think. They both have the common, the sort of the theme of love or lost love. That's something that they both share. They're both wandering around that axis. So what can we do that is as far detached from them as possible? I know. Someone that doesn't really care too much about anything other than themselves. Someone who is selfish. Someone that has a primary value system of freedom even. Perhaps fame. Very self-centered, egotistical character. They could be fun-loving. They don't have to be a villain at all, heads up. They could be an opponent that simply gets in the way, not through violence, but by taking things, tricking the party. And again, we ask ourselves, what could this person attack in the party? And in this instance, they could attack their openness, their kindness. By tricking them, by taking advantage of them, they could do things that the party would not be expecting or be sufficiently knowledgeable as to how to deal with, which again allows them to express their own values. Now, what this means is we have 3 players in our game thus far who are all opposed from each other because they all want the same thing, but they all want to do and have different things from it. No one person can be satisfied if the other achieves their goal, because that will mean they didn't achieve theirs. It's very easy to visualize in a plot where we have to gain an item, but for influence within a town, it's the same thing. So we have these players. I say players, I mean NPCs at this point, but they are sort of key players in plot and story and locale, let's say. Well, not in story. You know what I mean. Now we need to make another. So we take the third one we've just created, okay, the selfish individual, the chaotic individual, and what can we create to make someone truly opposed to him? Again, so all 4 of these individuals are as different as possible from each other. They must have opposition, ideally. Okay, we've got that chaotic selfish, self-centered. Let's go for someone that is entirely order focused, hyper order, hyper power focused. That's not something the selfish person wants quite so much. It's not something anyone has really dabbled on as a theme. Power seems pretty appropriate here. Power, tyranny, perhaps, hyper order, efficiency. That sounds pretty good. That sounds pretty good. So again, not necessarily a morally ill person, someone that you can look to and see a clear reasoning for why they want this thing. In this particular situation, they want to find the chest because it will allow them to control the sea and eradicate piracy forever, which is a reasonable moral argument. We have a protagonist who wants to get the chest because it'll free their father who they're trying to save. We have a selfish individual who would like the chest because they have a debt. And again, all of these reasons that the characters want to do the thing tie in to their goals, to their values. So once you know what their values are, you know why they want to do the thing, and then you can cook up something that is just perfect for that person. Same for the primary villain. He wants a chest, well, because there's hearts in it, and if someone else finds it and stabs it, he's not going to be a squid octopus crab thing anymore. So we have a wonderful system here to create a variety of opponents for your players. Not all of them have to be people that your group will ever fight, but they will create conflicts. They will create situations and environments where your players are going to have to think, we have a problem here. And that's wonderful. That's going to create an organic feeling world and experience for your players, and it's going to help you as a GM have an endless amount of ideas as to what incidents you can throw at your group by the ambitions of these 3 different individuals. Now, on that note, though, I would say if you can extrapolate these individuals to wider groups, it also works really well. So if you take each individual and make them part of an organization or make them represent a larger whole, it doesn't have to be the case, but you look at Johnny Depp within this, you look at Jack Sparrow, and he almost represents pirates as a whole. Not all of them, but a visualization, an embodiment of the trope. You have not just the villain on a ship, you don't just have Davy Jones, but you have Davy Jones' crew. You have this entire world of mystic, creepy stuff, really, that he sort of feels like he's at the center of. And again, you have the hyper-order general, I always forget his name, Cutler Beckett, and again, he seems to be part of a larger system. So it's almost like you have a group of factions fighting each other. So this is a really nice way to do it. It's not just think about it on an individual level, but try and represent these individuals with larger organizations as well. That way you get very nice themes. It's very clear to see in something like Lord of the Rings, where you have light and dark, you have order and chaos, etc., battling against each other. But then you can break it down to also look at the elves and the dwarfs, and again, these are all sort of slightly opposed from each other and have very differing values, which can be a nice source again of conflict and friction. It's why I love fantasy. It's why I love these tropes. So I think we've covered the majority of this, but there is something that needs to be sort of just highlighted again, is that this is a tool that can help you think about what you've created. It can help you analyze your current big bads, your current villains, to make them more interesting. This perhaps does present the need to maybe create more humanistic enemies or opponents if you want to go down this style and route. If you have a primary villain that is a giant troll, it creates a very difficult scenario where the values of this troll are going to pose out to play. It's doable, but the genre is going to be very, very different as a result. You're not going to get this constant drama and tension through human interaction. So this is perhaps somewhat suited more to a certain type of campaign. It does really well for Grimdark because it allows human conflict to come into play within a world where there are constant outside threats as well. So it would mean that more likely that cults and even just people are your primary opponents rather than the sort of token races and dangers within the setting. They can be thrown in the middle. They can be working with some of these individuals. They can still be tied in. But let's say this is perhaps a little bit more of a human approach to the story. But I think it's a great tool to try and come up with a primary opponent, asking yourself, how do his values allow him to attack the party's values? What is it that the party wants to do? He wants to do that too. Then create someone in opposition to both. Think to yourself, what is so far detached and so different from both of those that could take advantage of the players or could attack them in another way, and then create his opposition as well. And you have a really, really good start for a series of opponents along a journey campaign, or even a group of opponents within a reveal campaign that are constantly causing your players a little bit of extra stress. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this has been useful. Feel free to leave some comments down below. I think this is really, really great tool. Look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Take care.